Hello. Good day, everyone. Welcome to ME154. So, unfortunately, we are back to a recorded lecture, this time on something a little lighter, which is the flywheel. So, our purpose for this lecture is just threefold. We want to understand when do we use flywheels for mechanical systems. Next is we define features that we find in the torque performance of a rotating shaft that has a flywheel. And of course, we want to calculate a reasonable parameter for the flywheel in order to do its job. Now, of course, if you've actually gone through ME 160 now, flywheels are just these heavy masses that have a strong rotational inertia. And when you have something that has a strong rotational inertia, there are a few implications. So, number one, when you have a high rotational inertia, your velocity does not change easily. So that means it takes a while for the shaft that has this big mass to adapt its speed. So for some applications, this is actually useful. So you have a resistance to sudden torque on rotational changes. Number two, since it is heavy and it has dynamic rotation, it is capable of storing and dispensing kinetic energy for a variety of reasons. So don't mind this arrow. I kind of mistakenly put it there. So some examples of flywheels. I believe you've seen this before, especially if you've gone through ME 173.1. This fan here is not the flywheel, but the magneto that is connected to this flywheel fan is the flywheel. So the magneto, I believe there is some confusion when it comes to this. The magneto itself is the flywheel. So it performs a double function. It's heavy and it also has magnets which enable the ignition system. So another application here, this one is ginormous. So here is a pump and is connected to a very big spoken or rather a spoked flywheel. So these used to be common, especially during the steam engine period where they didn't really have, or rather, they relied a lot on reciprocating motion in order to drive rotation. So you needed these big flywheels in order to stabilize the rotation of the shaft. And of course, in modern times, we are exploring means of storing and dispensing energy through flywheel energy storage, such as this example in NASA. So this is just a container. There is a long cylinder hidden inside this casing, and that one is the flywheel itself. Now, in order to properly understand what's going on with the flywheel, we have to take a look at its um, essentially equation of moment. So equation of moment for rotation. So this is our body. So this is J sub m theta dot, theta double dot I mean. So this is just lingo, similar lingo for I times alpha, our mass inertia times angular acceleration, and is equal to the torque that is being applied at the starting end of the shaft with the flywheel and the torque that is being exerted at the opposite end. So when you write out the equation of motion, this is what it looks like. Now for flywheels, we do apply a simplification. We assume that the entire shaft, including the flywheel, is rigid. So that means every part of the flywheel and its shaft is rotating in sync. So you don't really get any deformation. You will still get torque differences, but the angular deformation will just not be there. So, all right. Let's examine the profile of a flywheel under some uneven operation. So, flywheels typically see service in these kinds of applications. So, there are two curves here on this graph. There is one for the torque, which is the solid line here, and there is the dashed line for the angular velocity. Let's look at the torque part of the graph first. So as you can see here, this entire graph is implying that this cycle repeats. So that means you will get a burst of positive torque. So this is the perspective of the flywheel. So the flywheel is going to receive some positive torque, and then later it's going to receive negative torque. And the effect of that on the velocity is such that when the uh, shaft has this speed omega 1, if it receives torque, it speeds up. So it starts to store energy. And when it is experiencing negative torque, the angular speed drops. So that means it is dispensing energy. So this positive area here, u sub 1 or u sub I think, is the area under the curve, and this is the amount of energy that the flywheel stores in this period. Now for the opposite, so you have this negative area below the x-axis. This is the amount of energy, this shaded area here, that the flywheel provides or dispenses. So again, this is an uneven torque profile, and this is when you usually um, decide to use a flywheel because there is repeating pattern of uneven torque. So if we calculate the amount of energy at this point, theta sub 1, this is what we get. So this is just 1 half I omega squared. Don't be scared of the J sub m. I put in J sub m to say that this is a rotating mass inertia, because I've noticed that some students have difficulty distinguishing the I and the J. So I just put in the subscript there so that there's very little confusion. If we can do this for state theta 1, we can also do this for state theta 2, of course. And if we want to obtain the amount of energy that the flywheel stored between these two angles, we just take the difference of the energies. And if we want to take the energy that the flywheel dispenses at this period, we just take the energies at theta 3 and theta 4 and get the difference. So if we assume that the flywheel is just meant to simply service this amount of torque, or it's just meant to service this amount of energy, then we can assume that this delta here, this shaded area here, must equal this negative area here. Now, that is one case. It can be that this shaft can provide more torque than it is dispensing, or it can be the other way around. As we go along, we will be exploring only one of those situations, and that will make itself clear soon. Before then, just gonna check on some things. All right, so let's proceed. So in real applications, we do see a lot of uneven torque when there is either reciprocating motion or shock loads. So one example of a reciprocating motion is the combustion engine. So what you see here is the torque profile of an I6 engine. So I6 meaning it has six inline piston cylinders and they are firing in a particular order. So these are the torque profiles that are generated from a single cylinder overlapping each other. So if you want to get the full picture, you have to add up all these curves so that you get the total overall torque profile that the crankshaft of this engine is feeling. So there is really no escape from this kind of uneven torque input, and that is inherent to the design of a reciprocating piston cylinder engine. The other one is shock loads. So when you have a drill press or a punch press, there will be a period in its operation where the machine the machine from its tool head will experience sudden loads. So it's similar to a drill press wherein At one moment, the drill is just free, it's just rotating as is with no load, and then suddenly it encounters a piece of wood. So that shock load will travel from the tool head all the way up to the motor itself. So what you see here, this graph, is a picture of the nominal torque that is being experienced or that is being exerted at the load and at the motor. So what you notice here is that the load torque, regardless of modifications to the motor flywheel system, remains the same. It's a shock load, so it's a very sudden spike. But when it comes to the motor load, it seems that from the original torque spreading to the new torque spreading, something occurred that smoothened the experience for the motor itself. And that is what the flywheel in this application has to do. It has to smoothen the impact that reaches the motor. It can't really do anything about the loading itself because that is part of the job, but it can smoothen the impact for very sensitive equipment, such as motors themselves. So let's look at the engine application. So this might be what a single cylinder engine curve might look like. So in order to smoothen out the output of the crankshaft, of course, we don't want the crankshaft to just speed up, speed down willy-nilly. We want a smoothness to the rotation that the engine delivers. And in order to do that, we need a flywheel that will first build up its stored kinetic energy at the greatest positive loop in its torque curve in order to supplement the rest of its periodic behavior. So again, the flywheel has to take energy from its greatest positive loop during the engine cycle to supplement the roughness for the rest of its period. So eventually you'll get this kind of mean torque T sub m here, and the T sub m is kind of like the averaging picture of the torque that the engine actually delivers. So if you want to calculate the power of the torque, T sub m would be what you put in to the formula T omega. So in order to be energy supplying, this mean torque has to be positive. So essentially, uh, this curve, this torque curve has to be net positive. So there is a positive torque that is received. I believe this is during the power stroke, and then for the rest, there is sometimes low, sometimes negative torque. Now, in order to find the mean torque, what we have to do is we have to integrate the area in this entire period. So when we integrate this area, we use this equation. So this is just the generic term. So this is from 0 to the end of the period tau, and it is enclosing the torque T, d theta. And the generic term for the solution to this integral is this mean torque times d period. So when we perform this integration, we get the total energy by the cycle, and we can divide the energy of the cycle by the period to get the mean torque. Now, all right, let's get to it. So this is the expression for the energy at one angular position, and this is the energy change from one angular position to another. So for engine cylinders, or rather, no, for flywheels, we have a standardization procedure to account for the variety of the energy fluctuations, or the speed fluctuations rather. We have what we call the coefficient of speed fluctuation, C sub S. C sub S takes the difference between the starting and ending speed of the largest torque fluctuation divided by the nominal angular speed. So the nominal angular speed is just the average of these two quantities. And if you substitute these into the delta E equation, you get a much more compact formula. So this is just the speed fluctuation times the mass moment inertia times the nominal angular speed. So here are some coefficient of speed fluctuations, and this is a coefficient of energy fluctuation. So this is different. We will ignore this for the semester, but here we are. We have a coefficient of speed fluctuation. Most of these are below 1, which is good. But take a look here. Which ones have the largest C sub S? So the largest ones are contained for crushing machines. So this is point 2, and hammering machines, point 2. Take note that these machines experience high shock loads. If it's not shock loads, it's a short burst of high intensity operation. So when you have a high intensity operation, the fluctuation in the speed of your rotation tends to be very wild. So going back, so here we are again. Um, Now, in order to calculate a proper mass moment inertia for our flywheel, we have to quantify the area here in the positive loop minus the area below the mean torque. So the modification to our integral here would be this. So this delta E for Q1, we're assuming that this positive loop occurs in Q1. So this one um, has us integrating the torque minus the mean torque that we have solved from this equation, and then integrating it from 0 to the end of whichever this positive loop ends. So yeah. Now let's go to an example. So this is a little straightforward. Now we have an engine. It supplies this kind of torque per cycle. So this is the same graph. And the engine rotates at 250 rads per second. So we have to look for four things. First, we have to find the total energy per cycle. Next, we have to find the mean torque. Third, we have to find the inertia of the flywheel. And fourth, we have to obtain the uh, angular speeds at the wildest fluctuation, which is omega 1 and omega 2. Now, here we have two quantities also given. We have the graph and the numerical or the tabular expression of this entire graph. So this graph, take note, it is split into two columns. We have theta in degrees and torque in pound force inch. And it just repeats from 0 to 720 degrees. Why is it in 720 degrees? Because this engine is a four-stroke engine. So, all right. What do we do first? So, all right. First of all, we start with integrating this entire curve to get the energy per cycle. So this is the generic form. All right, so we have a table. How do you do this? So from this point on, we have to undertake a numerical integration method. Now, I believe NSI 21 has been recently trying to incorporate numerical methods in its curriculum, just in case there are several. So this trapezoidal rule is just one of them. I find that the trapezoidal rule is actually accurate enough and simple enough. It balances both ease and sort of accuracy in order to get a good picture of this graph. So the formula of the trapezoidal rule is for every energy between two rows, so let's say 0 to 15, that energy can be calculated as if it's the area of a trapezoid. So 1 half B1 plus B2 times height divided by 2. Your B1 and B2 for this case is the two torque values. So if it's 0 to 15, is your two bases are 0 to 800. 2800, I mean. So you add these up and then you subtract the angular difference and then you divide by 2. And that is the trapezoidal area for that range. And now you have to do this for every single step. So there are 48 steps in total here. And if you add them up together, you will get this value, 3368 inches pound force. So since we're in British units, keep in mind that when it comes to mechanical or kinetic energy, the British system prefers inch pound force or foot pound force. All right. So now let's get it on. Next quantity. So we have to compute the mean torque. So now that we've computed the total energy per cycle, this is easy. The total energy per cycle is actually the mean torque times the period of the entire cycle. So we know the period of the cycle, it's actually 4 pi. So 0 to 720 is 4 pi. And we divide the answer from the first question by 4 pi. And we get this. This is the torque, the mean torque. It's 268 pound force inch. So here's a reminder, since we're in British units, typically torque will be the unit force times the radial arm. So in that order, force and the unit for the radial arm. For kinetic energy, the quantity or the unit is the distance times the force. So it's kind of swap. Keep that in mind because that order will determine what kind of quantity it is. So is it torque? Is it energy? You have to mind the order. All right. So next, let's calculate for the flywheel inertia. Now to do that, we have to take the starting loop. So this is the loop wherein the flywheel will store energy to dispense for the rest of the cycle. And where is that positive loop occurring? It's occurring from 0 to 180. So what about these positive areas? We can ignore them for now. We can assume that this entire large section here is essentially the point of wildest fluctuation. So this is our priority. So from 0 to 180, we're going to compute the change in energy. And not just the change in energy, we're going to compute the change in energy um, rather graphically, the area under this curve minus the area beneath the mean torque. So we're only going to compute this area here, and it is represented by this curve. So once you're done with calculating the energy per range, you have to repeat this cycle. So you're going to subtract all of the torque values by your mean torque and then redo the numerical integration again. But this time, you're going to do it from the start to end of your positive loop. And that is this value. Okay, so what can I do with this value now? We have several expressions for delta E with that involves the mass inertia. So we have this equation. So we actually know the coefficient of speed fluctuation. It's zero point 0.1 from the given. We also have 250 rides per second as the nominal speed, omega. So we can simply just plug and play, and we have this mass inertia. It's 0.565 pound force second squared inch. So again, be careful of these units because British tends to be very strange when it comes to kinetic related quantities. So this is now your mass moment inertia. So if you're designing a flywheel, whether it's a rim flywheel, so all the mass is concentrated on the outside, or if it's a fat disc flywheel, your value for the mass inertia has to rest on this value. Now on to the last one, we have to compute omega 1 and omega 2, which is essentially the the start and end angular speeds of the positive loop where the wildest fluctuation occurred. So to do that, we actually have two equations involving omega 1 and omega 2. That is for the speed fluctuation and the nominal angular speed. Rearranging these equations, you actually get a system of linear equations. From here, you can just add these up and you'll get the definition of one term in particular, that is omega 2. And by substituting omega 2, or rather, by assuming that omega 2 is already solved, we also get the expression for omega 1. So by inputting these, you get the following values. So is this correct? So omega 1 has to be lower. That is because this is the period where the flywheel is storing energy. So supposedly at 0 degrees, your speed is omega 1. And then as it's storing energy, as the flywheel is storing energy, once it reaches the end of that cycle, omega 2 will be larger. Now, let's look at some examples of other torque curves. So, this illustrates the effect of having multiple cylinders for your crankshaft. So, here is our I4 torque profile. So, inline 4 cylinders. The white mark is the zero torque, while the red mark is the mean torque. So, what you notice here is that the y axis is not absolute torque, but rather percent mean torque. So what you notice here is for the I4, you have a very wild fluctuation from 0 to 400, almost 400% of the mean torque. And you also have negative values, negative 100% of the mean torque. The moment you start adding cylinders, so you transition from I4 to an I6 to a V8, what you see in these graphs, even though they seem wild, if you look at the endpoints of the amplitudes of their curves, you see that they're starting to get smaller. They're starting to get a lot more even. So for the I6, the peak torque is now just 250% of the mean torque. And the torque profile itself doesn't really reach negative 100% anymore. When it comes to the V8, you see that there is very little negative torque. Yeah, there's no negative torque here, and the peak torque here is less than 200% of the mean torque. So by adding cylinders, you actually even out the torque profile, so the flywheel will have an easier job managing the speed fluctuations in your drivetrain. So other applications, you can indeed use flywheels to store energy, and this already being done, being explored. Right now, they are currently using composites because of their high specific energy. I am not sure what constitutes the property of high specific energy. I'll leave that up to you to explore. I am not sure if this is specifically density itself, because otherwise they just say, oh, it's the density. The other thing about flywheel energy storage is that their bearings, the ones that help the shaft itself, that provide something for the shaft to rest on, are magnetic. So magnetic bearings are really cool because they allow for much less friction during the rotation. Hence, a lot of the energy that is being sent to these flywheels are really going into the kinetic energy of the flywheel rotation. Now, another application, this one is really cool. These are reaction wheels. So, in the bowels of space, it is really hard to orient a satellite body. And by using reaction wheels, which are essentially motor powered flywheels, you can help the satellite orient itself, or allow the satellite to experience a particular angular speed in a particular axis. So the reaction wheels, they typically come in sets. So for example, this reaction wheel should have a partner, or these two other flywheels here, one for each axis. They'll be the ones to manage the angular momentum of the satellite on those respective axes. So a change in the speed in one reaction wheel will cause a particular effect on its angular speed or in its orientation. And this is a very hot topic because a lot of countries, especially developing countries, are sending things to space, and they need the ability to precisely orient their satellites towards a particular position. And that is it for flywheels. Thank you so much.